happy evening, a very happy Sunday to every one of you who joined with us today for our Optometric Association of Tamil Nanbargal's I Teach program. And so this is a sort of long awaited program. And we've been waiting for over 2 weeks to sort of listen to Dr. Ramesh's expertise on OCT and glaucoma. So before we begin the program, it's my honor to be introducing the moderator for the session. So the moderator for the session is Ashwini, and Ashwini, who is currently a consultant optometrist at Ashwini Eye Care and Aravind Opticals, Ambattur, Chennai, is a graduate of the Elite School of Optometry. So soon after graduation in 2009, she joined her practice at Ashwini Eye Care, and she also did her post-graduation in optometry from Sri Jayendra Saraswati Institute of Optometry, and she also holds an MBA in hospital administration. So a little bit about the legacy of Ashwini Eye Care. Ashwini Eye Care was established in 1994, and it developed from just a single room to a secondary eye care center over these years. And to proudly mention about Ashwini as such, Ashwini was the first optometrist in her locality to actually establish herself as an independent optometry practitioner, and who also sort of, with the expertise that she gained with her practice, she was able to distinguish what sort of an exemplary optometry service that she can provide compared to ophthalmologists within the hospital setup. And Ashwini's passion is ocular diagnostics, and so she has also been instrumental in enhancing the ocular diagnostics examination system and expand the diagnostic practice in her diagnostic instrument set in her practice, beginning from perimetry, OCT, B-scan, and also she has established protocols for the same. And having an MBA in hospital management, she also takes care of establishing systems, procedures, documentation, NABH guidelines, certification audit, and she's been instrumental in training optometry interns with both clinical procedures and diagnostics. And of course, she also trains all other staff members and takes care of community outreach programs focusing on refractive error, cataract, and glaucoma. And it's a pleasure to really have you with us today, Ashwini. And I hand over the stage to you now to take over the session.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Rizwana ma'am. A very good evening to one and all. I welcome you all to this interesting session on interpretation of glaucoma OCT report. At the outset, I feel so privileged to introduce my teacher, Dr. Ramesh SV. Dr. Ramesh, he completed his undergraduation in optometry in 2001 at Elite School of Optometry. Soon after, he began his career as an optometrist and clinical researcher and has 20 years of academic, clinical, and research experience in the field of optometry, vision science, and eye care. He completed his doctorate in 2014 at ESO in collaboration with Shankar Nethralaya and BITS Pilani, India. His research focus as part of the doctoral work was estimating progression of glaucoma, both structural and functional changes, evaluated using ophthalmic imaging and perimetry tests over a period of 5 years as a part of the Chennai glaucoma study conducted at Shankar Nethralaya Eye Hospital, Center of Excellence in Eye Care in India. He has received the Indo-US Public Health Research Postdoctoral Research Fellowship in 2014 at Wilmer Eye Institute, Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, USA. Their interdisciplinary research team has received over Indian rupees of 5.2 crores research grants from national, international, and industry funding agencies. He has 58 research articles in peer-reviewed index journals with H-index of 18 and has filed 3 patents. He was a senior research scholar and assistant professor at Elite School of Optometry, Shankar Nethralaya. He is currently an associate professor and heading the Department of Optometry, Manipal College of Health Professions, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. He is one of the coordinators in India for Erasmus Project Oculus, Optometry Curriculum for Lifelong Learning through Erasmus. Oculus is a consortium of optometry educators with the aim to reform optometry education in Israel and India towards European standards and develop resources for improved education through lifelong learning. He also has a keen interest towards techno-entrepreneurship and actively supports the same. He is the founding director of Vicent Healthcare Private Limited, incubated at Manipal Universal Technology, and business incubator and recipient of Biotechnology Ignition Grant. His work on cost-effective portable imaging device OcuDA won the gold medal for best innovation at the DST Lockheed Martin India Innovation Growth Program in 2013, and he was also nominated mentor for the same in 2015. This team has collaborated with REMMED Poland in developing virtual reality-based smart tele-eye care technology. Due to the pandemic, the novel technology has had a virtual launch in the Indian market in March 2020. I'm excited to witness the revolution of this launch, which is going to be created in optometry field. He is a trustee of Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry in India. He is a member of Optometric Glaucoma Society in USA and also an active member and a steering committee member of Institutional Research Committee, MCHP, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. On behalf of OATN and iTeach, I am glad to welcome Dr. Ramesh to share his knowledge on interpretation of glaucoma OCT report. The questions will be addressed at the end of the sessions. I request the participants to either post their questions in the chat box, which will be addressed in the end, or they can even unmute themselves and then they can interact directly with the speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ashwini. Thank you, Dr. Jamil, Dr. KK, and JJB and friends from OATN, and all the good extended colleagues of optometry. So it's nice to see you all, but I was about to bug you guys 2 weeks earlier, but thought this will be the right time. Just on 11th of October is where we all meet today. Hope my screen is visible, right?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So today I'll be discussing with you the changing paradigms towards OCT in glaucoma. What are all the newer things, but basically also cover the need for OCT and also interpreting a basic OCT report. That'll help us as clinicians, basic clinicians in your clinic, so that you can quickly look into what is to be looked into that OCT report, so that you can better improve the quality of your glaucoma services at your clinic. I thank Mr. Aditya, our TMA Pi PhD scholar, who has helped me in collecting this presentation. And it is very important that I thank all my gurus, because my guru, Dr. Ronnie George, Dr. Bhaskar sir, Dr. Vijay ma'am, all of them were the core source for inspiring me into glaucoma, and tribute to them, to all my friends from the Chennai Glaucoma Study for keeping me inspired even. So I think what is very important for us to first understand is the disease per se. Glaucoma, as we all know, is an irreversible, causes irreversible blindness. And the major aspect is it leads to loss of RNFL. So retinal ganglion cells and the related axons, which is the retinal nerve fiber layers, are affected. So we need a technique that can evaluate, or methods that we have to be competent enough to look at the retinal nerve fiber layers. Okay, and what do? Is to look in whether these RNFLs which are damaged show a corresponding visual field defects. So this is what we look in the whole care of glaucoma. So if there is a optic nerve head damage that is established and a corresponding visual field, mostly triggered by a process of apoptosis and it extends over time, is what the pathophysiology is all about, right? So the primary factors are, we all know that one of the easiest or the modifiable risk factor which we can easily change is IOP. But there are also other modifiable risk factors, that is vascular insufficiency. That is, for example, if somebody is hypertensive, systemic hypertension is known to affect the vascular characteristics in a patient with glaucoma. So controlling their systemic hypertension can also help in the play of glaucoma. But when it comes to the primary optometric care or the ocular care, ophthalmic care, is that we end up with IOP as one of the most easiest modifiable risk factor. Some things that we cannot change, or we still are better understanding with these imaging systems that are coming in, is the secondary factors. That is, OCT has gone beyond just a clinical tool, but to also understand on a patient, on an individual who's live, a living individual, what is happening to the molecular mechanism. Like, for example, is there an enhanced oxidative stress that is happening? And these are all the future of OCTs that are coming in, okay? So basically in the whole thing of glaucoma, we need to understand the primary factors, and we use these imaging techniques to help understand the primary factors that cause the glaucoma and also correlate with the visual field functions. This is, I call it the black rainbow. Okay, so this is a concept introduced by Weintraub way back in 2004. That's when I joined my master's, if I'm not wrong, or completed my master's then. So this concept basically has been emerged out of a lot of research work. If you see all these topics that you see here, that is OHTS, EMGT, CIG, GTS, AGIS, all these are multicentric glaucoma studies done globally. The OHTS is called the Ocular Hypertensive Treatment Study, and there goes Advanced Glaucoma Intervention Study and the Normotension Glaucoma Study. So these research works, which have been done over the last 2 decades, have helped us understand, and the basic research that happens at the cellular level has given us this whole flow. So how does glaucoma start? Somewhere around 40. Till then, the patient might be normal, or 40, 45, he's okay. But suddenly there is a trigger of a process. That is the plant cell death. It could be genetically triggered. That's why we say glaucoma is a genetic disease. Okay, so there is initiation of apoptosis. So moment this change in the physiological characteristics in the retina starts, what starts is ganglion cells at the retinal nerve fiber or the retina starts to lose its strength. Okay, thereby slowly leading to optic nerve changes. But at this stage, we cannot see it by looking at a 90D or a direct ophthalmoscope. I would personally ask you not to use that ophthalmoscope, but even if you're looking at 90 diopter lens on your slit lamp, nothing will be seen here. That's why it's called the undetectable stage. And then slowly, without knowing, as glaucoma is a silent thief of vision, the patient doesn't know, neither you as a clinician do not know, till it transforms into asymptomatic disease. Even here, you would not be seeing subtle changes on your normal comprehensive eye examination. That is where you need imaging techniques like OCT and other techniques that are available today to help us identify those optic nerve changes or the retinal nerve fiber changes, which can be detected through imaging techniques. And you do better perimetric evaluation so that you end up finding out the earlier changes that are happening in the eye, because this is well established over time, and I think it's becoming it's a general norm in glaucoma practices. Early diagnosis of the glaucoma can help us prolong the chance of one getting blind due to this unforeseen disease, right? So it is very important that you detect it earlier. That is where we today in glaucoma practices, we emphasize a lot into advanced imaging, though it adds up to the quality of care that we provide. But if you can help that patient from becoming blind by detecting earlier, you can really make a good trade-off, right? That investments of 1,000, 2,000 rupees of scans every year is going to help them avoid blindness over the time to go. And then if you start detecting here, then you will be, as an optometrist, we will be capable enough to handle all the patients once you become competent with glaucoma detection skills and co-management skills. Still, you should aim at avoiding the patient coming into any visual field changes. The SAP, what I refer to, is the standard automated perimetry, that is the white on white perimetry otherwise, right? So when a patient comes into these levels, when he starts showing a white on white perimetry defect, this is the time around the transition between asymptomatic and symptomatic stages where you co-manage with the colleague. So you refer the patient to an ophthalmologist, and based on the clinical presentation, mostly either a medical treatment could be started, or a lens extraction could be looked at, or a surgical approach could be looked at. But the disease being chronic in nature, our care doesn't stop by simply referring. So an optometrist has to not just detect the disease earlier using these advanced imaging techniques. It is all the more important to ensure that the patient's visual field and the optic nerve head or the retinal aspects are stable over time. So you do periodic perimetric evaluations, and though it is not part of the scope of the study, today's presentation, we would look into in some of the presentation on the basic norms or the preferred practice pattern. I hear from the organizers today that there is going to be an announcement on the evidence-based practice patterns, which I really I'm looking forward, because that is something each one of us have to adopt in this co-management. How we as an optometrist will engage with advanced imaging techniques and keep patient first, because our whole thing is patient has to be served better, and the risk of him becoming blind should be reduced. So keeping that in mind, how do we co-manage with our colleagues, ophthalmologists, is what the whole thing is. Okay. So gradually, after somebody detects, shows defects in the white and white perimetry, they gradually get on to becoming blind, wherein you only have a central island of vision. So that is the whole black rainbow that is being explained. Okay. So as part of this presentation today, I am confident that all of you are doing comprehensive eye examination. I really respect you and salute you for doing that. And we do need to adopt tonometry as part of our evaluation, but equally important clinical skill as a glaucoma practitioner is gonioscopy and a grid slit lamp biomicroscopy. What I would be touching upon before I go into OCT is, we all need to understand what to look in when it comes to a normal retinal evaluation. So we are going to look at the posterior eye examinations today. Basically, what are we going to look at? Structural changes due to the disease, okay, which can be subjective in nature, in the sense you take up a 90D or take up a photograph with your non-mydriatic camera or your smartphone attached camera systems that are there in your clinic. So when you take an optic disc image or looking at a 90D, what do you look in? And how that visualization that you do or what you look into the optic nerve head comes on to why we need an objective evaluation, that is an OCT. So here you see that even optic disc image, though it is photograph, it is technically objective in nature, but I put it in subjective examination. Why? Because it is you as an individual or me as an individual has to make a decision. Okay, it's not giving me any values there, right? So that is where I put it as subjective in nature, because the knowledge and the skill sets and the experience that each one of us have in looking at all these optic disc images will vary as we depending on the level of glaucoma training, right? So just optic disc image is not just useful, but there are some tips that we should use in this whole exercise. Okay, the first thing that we all have learned is cup disc ratio, right? That is going to stay, right? Cup disc ratio is very important. It is a very, it's when you look into the optic disc, okay, you basically look at where the cup margins, where the blood vessels turn or the nerves bend, and that borders, you make an arbitrary ratio of the cup to disc, okay? The vertical cup to disc ratio is the important clinical sign that we will look at glaucoma. But what is the challenge that we have? Cup to disc ratio is highly dependent on disc size. Okay, so for example, if there's an hyperopic refractive error, the patient might have a literally small disc and there'll be no cupping at all. But if in other case, if he is a myope, he might have a larger disc where the cup disc ratio, whereas cup will be quite larger enough. So you have to always remember that a cup disc ratio of 0.5 and above, which was believed 3 decades earlier as glaucoma, is totally redundant, which means that do not take that as a cutoff, right? So that is where we need to look in how the cup disc ratio is dependent on disc size. So smaller discs have no cup, larger discs can have larger cup. So cup disc ratio is an important entity, not only in retinal evaluation in glaucoma, but also in OCT. But in OCT, the advantage is it easily gives you that correlation or correction with that of optic disc size. I would request the organizers, there are some drawings here which are coming in. I do not know why, but try to avoid it because it is adding up to the attention span of probably the listener. Okay, so what is the next thing that we do if not cup disc ratio is neural retinal rim, because this is the important characteristics of an optic nerve. Okay, in glaucoma evaluation, we look at what is the thickness of the retinal rim. What is that neural retinal rim? If this is the disc margin and this is the cup margin, the donut shaped orangish colored ring of tissue, that is the complete RNFL, retinal nerve fiber layer, which are leaving the retina, is the thickness of this inferiorly bigger as compared to superior, as compared to nasal and temporal. This eye is an right eye. So we look into ISNT. If the pattern beyond cup disc ratio, if the inferior rim is larger in size or thicker than the superior as compared to the nasal and temporal, then we say ISNT is followed, right? So what is this ISNT all about, right? Why should there be an inferior RNFL or rim being thicker? Simply, if you look at this image by Tarrant, okay, this shows the arcuate nerve fiber layers which come from all the way from across different parts of the peripheral retina, okay, which all exit. If you see that majority of the bundles of red, orange, and red here, which are shown in this belt, inferior and the superior, occupy the inferior and the superior part of the scleral foramen, right? So since there are more number of nerve fiber layers that are leaving the inferior and superior zone, the NRR, neuroretinal rim, is thicker in the inferior and superior zone. And if you look at the temporal zone, which is the most important one, that comprises of the papillomacular bundle, which is nothing else but the information coming from the macula to the optic nerve foramen or the scleral canal. That region of nerve fibers occupy the temporal part. So that is the thinnest of all. Then the nasal temporal. So inferior, thicker than superior, then nasal, then temporal. So this is the reason, if you see, if somebody has, why does glaucoma start with peripheral defects? So if there's a ganglion cell that is dying here, it first loses and causes a RNFL defect, and therefore causing a peripheral visual field defects and not central. And the papillomacular bundle is to be kept very intact, because the most important thing is we have to look at the macular scan in OCT and ensure that the RNFL, the papillomacular bundle is intact, because that is the reason why even an advanced glaucoma patient with glaucomatous optic atrophy might have a 6/6 vision, but nothing surrounding it, right? So if you now see, when you're doing a 90D evaluation, you go to a red free, that is, you put the green filter, or in most of the fundus imaging systems, you have a red free filter, right? You get the color and the red free image, right? I hope people here, listeners, will appreciate this kind of a pattern. Can you see? This is Tarrant's on the left is the picturistic or artistic representation. On the right is an RNFL image. Can you see that inferiorly between these two arrow marks, you can see that there is a loss of nerve fibers. Okay. Similarly, on the superior region, can you see there's a loss of nerve fiber layer? And the pattern in which you can see is similar to what is being depicted in this picture on the left. So if there is a visual field defect, you will see if there is an RNFL defect, okay, not at the asymptomatic stage, but at a slightly symptomatic stages, early glaucomas, you would look in. So mild or early to moderate glaucomas, you will see more of RNFL changes. In advanced glaucomas, this becomes completely black. Like, you know, the RNFL thickness becomes very redundant. So it becomes very challenging though. So this is very important for us to really look in, not just the ISNT in the optic nerve head, but beyond the optic nerve head, look into the surrounding region where there is the nerve fiber layer. Put a red free filter in your 90D evaluation, and you'll be able to pick up this kind of an arcuate loss of nerve fiber layers that are arising from a ganglion cell, which is somewhere here. So another for example, just to culminate, very quickly share a clinical care. What we do in clinic is we all looked at structural comparison, right? So here I'm showing an optic disc image. So the vertical cup disc ratio in this case, the cup is starting right away here, it's around 0.8, right? 0.7 to 0.8. inferior rim, ISNT is not followed. What I mean to say is inferior rim is thinner than the superior, and superior is then followed by nasal and temporal. So the temporal neuroretinal rim is thinner than what you see in inferior zone. And you can see a fantastic notching. This is a moderate glaucoma or even slightly advanced glaucoma, moderate glaucoma. Okay, how do I say that moderate or advanced? You will know when we do the functional changes, right? So moment you see this kind of a thing, and along with that, one of the pathognomonic sign of a glaucoma. So hemorrhages also happen with glaucoma, not just with diabetes and other diseases. But the type of hemorrhage that you see in glaucoma should be what you see here. Okay, you can see a flame-shaped hemorrhage that crosses the disc margin, and it is in the region where there is a notch. So there are two, three things that we are correlating here. There is a flame-shaped hemorrhage in the inferotemporal part of this right eye, right? And in that region, if I just look closely at the RNFL, at the neuroretinal rim, I'm seeing a fantastic notch. Okay, there is an inferior notch too. So better seen with just moving your 90D your slit lamp to a red free, you will beautifully see that there is an RNFL defect. So corresponding to that region where there was a hemorrhage, you can see that there is a dull region of the retinal nerve fiber layer being lost, as shown by these arrows here. What is more important is to look into whether there is a corresponding visual field defect, right? Which is very important for us to understand, is to look in this damage that is shown in the inferotemporal region. Does that show in the visual field defect? This is a moderate kind of defect because there is a paracentral defect that is very close to the macula that is showing a cluster of 3 defects, 3 points that are shown significantly affected. In the previous discussions, I've seen people beautifully have described to you the nuances of interpreting the 7 stages of perimetry. But here is what we do. So perimetry alone is no use, disc alone is no use, but pair them together. That is what makes you a good glaucoma practitioner. Okay, Ramesh, you talked about OCT. Let's get on to that, right? That's what we had to get on. But before we finally, I want to summarize before we jump on to OCT, because OCT is not going to be there in everybody's clinic. So glaucoma care needs OCT, but even with your competency to do a good optic nerve evaluation. So what do you look in when you do optic nerve evaluation is, first of all, compare between the eyes. Highly suggestive or very suggestive is a notching, a localized hemorrhage like the example that I showed you earlier, and asymmetry of more than 0.2 cup disc ratios between the eye. And when I say cup disc ratio, remember you have to also adjust it for the disc size. So if there's anisometropia, then that needs to be correlated too. So we need to look in these 3 signs, and other aspects of enlarging cup, absence of a rim, or a peripapilar atrophy are all suggestive changes that can be caused due to glaucomatous nerve damage. Okay. Fine. Let us now get on to OCT. So OCT, as all of you would know, it is a revolutionary technology that has really made diagnosing and monitoring in this most complex disease. I want you to remember the dark rainbow, it is very complex when it starts. Why does a patient become blind, or why is he progressing towards accelerated visual field loss, is something that was not understood by just red-free imaging and a normal photograph. But what OCT provides to us is that it can give you the damage that is happening to the retinal ganglion cells. Okay, we can quantitatively and objectively see where the damage is and how deep is the damage, and is our treatment that we are co-managing with our ophthalmology colleague helping us keep the damage under control, and are we limiting the progression from happening? So studies have clearly shown that OCT could detect glaucoma earlier, almost 5 years prior to any earlier visual field damages. That is during the asymptomatic stage. If you can look at some patients who are having RNFL thickness defects, then they have almost higher chance of developing visual field defects and transforming from asymptomatic to symptomatic state. So this is how you would do. So when you do an OCT, you can call them quite often, and your frequency of their clinical visit to your clinic, your optometric practice would be different, is what we should follow, right? So the principles of OCT has been covered in the previous talk, so I'm not going to put my time onto it, but basically it is a mixture of low coherence interferometry, and it is radically changed from a basic system of optical mirror based to today going into ultra high resolution OCTs, right? So what do we need to look in the OCT is we see three things, okay? So the structural changes precede functional changes is what research has established. So it is very important for us to establish in glaucoma what is the early structural changes, right? So in an OCT report, what we really look into is we look into these two aspects in the RNFL imaging systems. That is, when I'm going to image the surrounding region, I look for ganglion cell layer thickness and the retinal nerve fiber layer thickness. And the optic nerve head changes. How deep is the cup? All these three are the structural changes that I quantify using OCT in a very objective fashion. Okay, so you would see that very simply when you're doing OCT, what we try to do is we remember our anatomy classes, right? So in glaucoma, we basically look into the inner plexiform layer, ganglion cell layer, and RNFL layer. So in a normal fundus red-free imaging, I'm only getting a reflectance from the deeper cells, or basically it shows about the RNFL. But when I do an OCT, I can really see what is happening to the thickness of the ganglion cell complex. So these are some aspects that I'm going to introduce you today in this talk. So the OCT image or OCT report assessment will need you to understand that we are not only going to look at optic disc. Optic disc is one aspect, but the other thing that we are going to look at is peripapillary, surrounding the optic disc. What is the retinal nerve fiber layer, retinal ganglion cell layer, and inner plexiform layers thickness variations as compared to age match normal. And we will also be looking into the macula, because macular peripapillary, I mean the papillomacular bundle is the important thing that we need to keep intact so that the patient doesn't have loss of vision or goes into complete blindness even in the early to moderate stages of glaucoma. So this is what we would be looking in interpreting OCT. Another thing that we have to also remember is the optic nerve head. So you will be looking at optic disc, optic nerve head. So peripapillary nerve fiber layer is what we'll look in, but beyond that, we'll also be looking into the optic nerve head, looking at what is happening to the lamina cribrosa region. What is happening to the blood vessels that are coming in? Are they getting more thicker, or is there an angiographic changes that have been happening? In the recent conference, there was a presentation from one of the researcher team from Shankar Netralia on OCT angiography in glaucoma, right? Where we mainly look into the region of the optic nerve head, and we also look into the region where the nerve fibers leave the eye, and the cup to disc ratios and other aspects of it, right? So this is how you will see. So when we go into this presentation now, we will dwell into a couple of these aspects, right? So again, emphasizing that the need for OCT is not just because there is an advanced imaging tool. It is because the clinical understanding, okay, of a glaucoma has led us to a way that, you know, structural changes in the retina are very important in early diagnosis of glaucoma. So in this graph, you can clearly see that if you are dealing with a patient who's pre-perimetric glaucoma, that is before any perimetric change, or of those who are having mild, moderate, and severe glaucoma as visual field defects, you can see that RNFL changes show very early changes. You can see that that is the first to get affected, followed by optic nerve head changes, and then a white on white perimetry comes later. So perimetry is very important, but because perimetry is a psychophysical test, right? The patient has to respond. But if you're taking away that subjectivity away, imaging techniques of RNFL and optic nerve head makes it more useful in the clinical management of glaucoma. So this has been the early the journey of OCT. This was taken from Muna ma'am's paper in 2018 IJO. Okay, so there has been a lot of evolution in the OCT. Okay, so the time domain OCTs to today's spectral domain OCTs, there is a huge variation on the axial resolution, which means that it can give up to 5 to 7 micrometers of thickness. Transverse resolutions are better. Now we can go into 3D modeling, and within a matter of seconds, you'll get very high critical data, right? So if you look at it, the different types of OCT reports that you might see in your clinic, or a patient who will walk in, or if you're going to invest in, you might decide what you want to pump your funding into, because we all know the basic OCT, good quality one starts at somewhere around 20 lakhs, and the ultra high resolution goes near 1 crore, right? So in a normal clinic that you will regularly see is a Stratus OCT, the Carl Zeiss, or the Topcon one, which is 3D OCTs. All these are basically looking at OCTs, which also give you fundus imagings and things like that, right? The Cirrus high definition OCT is one that gives you very high resolution of OCT images. Then you will also see a lot of RT-view, that is OptoViews, which are coming in very more seen in recent days. So you will see that you will get images from OCT scans from Copernicus HR and HRT, which is Heidelberg Engineering has come out with Spectralis, which is one of the most popular imaging systems, which not only has OCT imaging, but also brings in other characteristics of angiography, autofluorescence, along with the imaging methods that are being used in OCT. So this is how you will see a lot of different OCTs that are available. But the core aspects are going to be, the principles are going to be two. One, we have to learn to look into the RNFL, retinal nerve fiber layer changes. And second, we need to understand the optic nerve head, cup-tusk ratios, and the ISNT. So these are the three things that we will end up looking at. So in most common optic OCT scan protocols, because what we need to look into is what are all the scan protocols, right? So there, we will also do the macular cube. What is macular cube? So macular, in the papillomacular bundle is very important, and macular changes are very essential in the management of glaucoma. So not just looking only at the optic disc, we should also look at OCT images. So we'll do the first, the most scans will start with optic disc cube, which means that they take a 200 by 200 optic disc centered imaging, which is a 6 millimeter square scan, which will look at the RNFL, peripapillary RNFL thicknesses, and the optic nerve head characteristics of cup disc ratio. And then you should also do something known as the macular cube, and macular cube of a high resolution is better when you're dealing with a moderate to severe disease patient. Okay, in this slide, you'll also see a lot of other jargons, right? You know, GC, IPL, GCA. What are these nomenclatures? RNFL is something you all would have known by now, because I've been emphasizing it very then and often. Retinal nerve fiber layer is very important. And then the optic nerve head. So RNFL and ONH are something all of you know. But this is something that we have to understand. GC, IPL, or a GCA, what does that mean? GCA refers to ganglion cell analysis. Okay, a GCA is basically when there is a thickness of the OCT that is comprising of both ganglion cell layer and the inner plexiform layer. So GC plus IPL is a GCA. And in one of the systems that is RT view OCTs, you'll also have another terminology known as ganglion cell complex. That is, they also bring in the RNFL layer together. So a ganglion cell thickness along with inner plexiform layer plus RNFL together, that is called the GCC complex. So what do we do these things? We basically use these thickness values, because in OCT we can get objective values of those thicknesses and compare it with age match normals to see whether a patient is showing early changes due to the disease. So experimental models have really shown that ganglion cell layer thicknesses are early affected in glaucoma, and measuring GCA, okay, will provide better understanding of the disease. Okay, so this is a Zeiss spectral domain OCT report. So if you look at the template, like, going to the templates of OCT, it is very important. First thing is demographic data, because you need to enter the right date of birth, because it is age matched data. In all these imaging systems, the normative data is very important, so that the imaging values that we get is compared to an age matched data. Demographic. Then comes another very important thing, that is signal strength, the quality of the imaging, which can be affected by many factors, right? Then the optic nerve head parameters. We talked about cup disc ratio, ISNT, asymmetry, right? All those things are on a click of button, it is summarized there. Then is the RNFL thickness. Okay, you have two things. That is, one is the retardation map. Okay, RNFL deviation map, otherwise called now. And then you have the ISNT, neural retinal rim thickness. Okay, what is the neural retinal rim thickness? Okay, how is the neural retinal rim thickness? And then RNFL, peripapillary RNFL, that how thick it is, and what is the as compared to age matched normal, how is the thickness varying? And then they also give you the quadrant wise, so that you can easily correlate it with the corresponding visual field defects, because glaucoma, as you have by now understood, that the inferior and the superior poles are the early to get affected in glaucoma. So we can see which part of the inferior or superior pole is affected significantly. And then the last is OCT images. So in demographic and the signal strength, any signal strength that is more than 8 is a good indication. A signal strength of 6 to 7, it could be due to cataract, a poor dilation, or a small eye movement, or the ability of the operator to take good images. So it has to be taken with caution, because that could give a little bit of noise. And if it is less than 5, then it is not reliable. And signal strength is also very important when it comes to the progression, because today we are talking about one single imaging, but what we use OCT is looking at progression of the disease, where signal strength of greater than 8 is better. So if you are involved in imaging a patient or using OCT to capture in your clinic, then try to get the best result of somewhere beyond 8 in your signal strength. And the demographic data is very, as I emphasized already, ensure that the date of birth and the genders are written properly. Okay, and check it twice, because those are small errors that can lead us to a lot of damage. Right. So the next thing in the optic disc cube is to look into the optic nerve head parameters. So optic nerve head parameters, you will have all these aspects. So for example, you will have average RNFL thickness. Okay, if you look at this image, I would want you to bring your attention to this ring. So the RNFL, retinal nerve fiber layers, are imaged around this ring, and those values are provided to us as a summary statistics. So it takes in that ring and gives you the average RNFL. And if it is in green, it means that it is within normal limits. So the average RNFL thickness is normal, but the right and left eye RNFL thickness shows some asymmetry, which is there is 64% asymmetry, which means that there is a difference in the RNFL thicknesses profile between the right and the left eye, right? That is an indication. And then you have the rim area, disc area, average cup to disc ratio, vertical cup disc ratio, and the cup volume. So the biggest advantage of an OCT is it can image the Z profile. It gives you the volume also. Okay, so what, as a busy clinician, we have to understand is you look at these color codings. Okay, and if the asymmetry, if it is red in especially the vertical cup disc ratio, rim area, and average RNFL thicknesses, then it highlights some significant changes due to the glaucoma disease. Okay, the thickness deviation map is something like this. So you have the ring that measures the RNFL thicknesses, right? So this was basically represented in warmer and cooler colors. Okay, so the warmer colors, like red, orange, and yellow, as shown here, are regions where the retinal nerve fiber layer is thicker, that is more thickness. The cooler colors like blue represents thinner as compared to surrounding. So you will see that ISNT, the kind of retinal nerve fiber layer arrangement that happens you will see that the RNFL thicknesses are thicker in the superior zone. But if a patient has got disease like the one on this part as shown in here, you will see that there will be defects that are shown. Okay, here is a left eye. So you will see that this is the color coded map and this is the deviation map. The deviation map shows how deviated or as compared to normative data is it. So you can see that the RNFL thickness is highly thin in the inferior and the superior zones. The color coding is slightly different here. So if you are looking at this blue background map, you have to look at red means thicker retina. But when you're looking at deviation map, red means that is significantly damaged retina. So when it comes to the next one, that is the neural retinal rim thickness graph. It is something like, the ISNT. So ISNT that you looked in when you're looking at 90D, I told you inferior rim should be thicker than superior. Okay, so how does OCT report that? Very simply, it takes in the characteristics of ISNT and then draws as a line graph here. Okay, so the right eye OD is shown as a thick line and a dotted line shows the left eye. And you can see that there are three things. Temporal, ISNT is split, or the whole curve, the whole circle is stretched into a single line, that is temporal, superior nasal, inferior temporal. Okay, it starts from here, it goes on and creates the whole belt. It stretches the whole RNFL, the ISNT or the neural retinal rim thicknesses here. And you can see that the superior neural retinal rim is in the red zone, which means that as compared to the normative data, this part of the left eye is showing lower RNFL thicknesses or neural retinal rim thicknesses. So by looking at the pattern of this snake or these two lines, we can find out where they fall. If it falls in green, then it's good. If it falls in yellow, then it means that there is a change. And we can also compare between the right and the left eye so that you can see a clear cut of asymmetry that is happening in these optic disc images. So one is looking at the optic nerve head, that is ISNT is what's called the retinal nerve fiber layer thickness graph. The other is retinal nerve fiber, sorry to rephrase, the neural retinal rim thickness graph, that is the optic disc neural retinal rim. The rim thickness graph is shown in the OCT report, and then we also see the RNFL thickness map, RNFL TSNAT graph, which is shown here. So instead of just doing a red-free imaging or looking at a red-free filter where you saw those wedge-shaped defects, here you can clearly see and quantify in which region. So in this case, the right and the left eye, the inferior RNFL, retinal nerve fiber layer, is so thin that it falls in the red zone, which is seen in disease patients. Okay, by looking at this is somebody who has a normal RNFL thickness in the right and left eye, but this is on this side, the left is double hump, otherwise known as a double hump pattern. You can see that the in a normal healthy retina, the inferior RNFL is thicker than the superior, so that's causing the two humps. Superior is thicker and then inferior. Okay, inferior is thicker than superior, so this double hump is what a kind of a mountain-like appearance. If the RNFL of a patient falls in this double hump pattern and it is within the green zone, which is the normative data for that respective age group, we are confident that the patient has no changes. In contrast, on the right is a patient who has glaucoma. You will see that the double hump pattern as represented by the snake, the lines here, that is the dark, which is OD, and the dotted lines are the OS, are showing that in the superior zone, this patient might have, okay, there are some nerve fiber layers, so you might not have any visual field effects inferiorly, but as it goes on to the inferior RNFL, retinal nerve fiber layer, you are seeing a loss that is significantly caused due to the disease. So the next aspect of the optic disc cube is the report is quadrant-wise representation, right? We look at the inferior quadrant, then there is normative data. The average thickness of those quadrants that have been seen are being represented in the right and the left eye. So the RNFL quadrants, so the inferior quadrant, superior quadrant, nasal and temporal. So we can then see that inferior and superior in this patient in both the right and left eye are affected. then even splitting it even by clock hours, you have these data. So you can make a better correlation in your clinical thing as you compare it with visual field effects using this clock dials. So the last part of the OCT report is this optic OCT image, which is centered to the optic nerve head. So you can see that how deep is the cupping, what is the RNFL thicknesses and things like that. So you can see these three characteristics both on the horizontal scan and the vertical scan, all right? Sorry, horizontal and vertical scan. So this is a slide that compares two common imaging techniques. On the left is the Spectralis SD-OCT. On the right is the RTView XR report. So you will see that there are slight differences in Spectralis, that is HRT system. So far we saw about the Cirrus OCT report, but I'm just giving you a snapshot of how other printouts, though these are OCT in glaucoma, but the arrangements are slightly different. Okay, say for example, you will see the OCT image in a Spectralis, okay, and you will also see the RNFL thicknesses, and this is where the quadrant-wise asymmetry data is given. Okay, so the data of RNFL thicknesses and things are here, which is color coded again, right? And you have the quadrant-wise thickness variation, double hump pattern shown here in a Spectralis. If you come to an RT view, you have a slightly different appearance of the deviation or the retardation map. Here they get in something known as the GCC, which we talked about earlier. So it is not only the RNFL, they also give you the thickness of the retinal ganglion cell layer and also the inner plexiform layer. So that is what is the thickness map that is slightly shown here, along with the color coding. And you also have the summary of the average RNFL thicknesses, vertical cup disc ratios, and other things that are shown earlier in the previous OCT report also. And in all these, you will see the double hump pattern. So in a busy clinic, what we need to look into is, are there any of these tables that are showing? You first have to look into the optic disc using a red-free or a color 90D evaluation and make your tentative diagnosis. And with that notes that you have made during the comprehensive examination, you then compare it with OCT report, saying that, okay, is there an ISNT? Is the RNFL thicknesses fall below the normal ranges? So you just look at the double hump pattern and look for where the lines are falling, right? So in a single image, you can get both the right and left eye, and you can have to evaluate it. And when you do the perimetry, it is very important for you to also correlate this quadrant-wise changes and compare it with what you see in the visual field. Okay, just to emphasize, so in RTView, you also get the GCC, which is ganglion cell analysis, that is ganglion cell layer plus inner plexiform layer in along with RNFL thicknesses. So the difference is each of these imaging systems have to play around with the copyrights and the patents of the other competitors. So they come out with various combinations, but also backed up by science. So it is not just to avoid competition and infringement challenges, but also to back up with science, wherein the ganglion cell layer thicknesses are better indication of glaucoma, because by just looking at RNFL, you might miss out, but if you're looking at ganglion cell layer density thicknesses, then you are making a better judgment of the disease. So this is how an RTView image will appear, say in the macula. So you have a scan that is ganglion cell analysis at the macula, and also which will give you comparison of what is happening to the GCA, that is ganglion cell thickness plus inner plexiform layer thicknesses. So you have the RNFL thickness map, deviation map as compared to normative data, okay, and then the OCT image that is showing you where the defect is. So as you become more and more better with interpreting OCTs, a good OCT clinical interpretation, we more concentrate on the RNFL thicknesses and correlate on the bundle of nerve fiber layers, okay, that are getting affected. So this is the next level of talks, shortly after you get acquainted with seeing more of these images and getting acquainted with easy interpretation. The next level would be advanced level, looking at RNFL thicknesses at the OCT map. So then we have the GCA analysis, okay, which further goes on to the deviation map. And very simply, all these have normative data. So in a busy clinician, you just need to look into what is the value of the GCC, 85, 79, and is it green in background or red background or yellow background? If it is red, which means that the thickness is significantly low. A healthy person will have a inferior thickness 79 for his age, but a same age group patient, if he has 49, which means that the ganglion cell analysis, that is the ganglion cell layer plus the inner plexiform layer, average thickness has been lower, significantly lower due to the disease of glaucoma. So this is something that is adding more evidence than just looking at RNFL alone. Okay, so an RT view OCT will have not just the macular RNFL thicknesses, but you'll also have the optic nerve map. And again, I showed you the comparison of how to interpret, and you will have different, like the Vastu differences of placing things in various locations. But the whole idea is to look into the color coding, look into the normative data comparison, look into the data that has been provided, the volumetric analysis or the planimetric analysis. Volumetric refers to the rim volume, cup volume, etc. Planimetry refers to optic disc area, cup to disc ratio, and RNFL thicknesses are other aspects that we have taken when we interpret OCT imaging systems. Okay, so another snapshot of how a spectralis, HRT spectralis thing will appear. You will see more noise. You know, it gives you actual fluctuations and not normalized graphs that you see in other imaging systems. So interpretation is almost similar between any of these reports, be it Cirrus OCT, spectral domain OCT, or the RTView or spectralis. Very simply, you look into what is the values, or whether you are looking at the RNFL thickness, overall average RNFL thickness, that is the volumetric data or the planimetric data, or the quadrant wise data, or the double hump pattern. You have to, as a clinician, you basically look in where does it fall. If your date of birth you entered is right, the normative data will give you the values are within normal limits will be in green, and borderline and outside normal limits. So you need to really look in and see whether if it is a good quality imaging, that is the signal to noise ratio is more than or the signal strength ratio is better than 8, then you can rely upon these values and say if somebody falls in the red, then he needs to be looked in more closely. So just to compare all the three together. So RTView will give you a different orientation. It not only gives you RNFL thicknesses, but it actually gives you GCA, that is glaucoma ganglion cell complex, right? Ganglion cell analysis. So it gives you that interpretation, right? So you need to look into that. And again, the color coding makes sense here. Cirrus OCT basically gives you the RNFL thicknesses, okay? The peripapillae RNFL thicknesses. In this blue column here, that is called retardation map, you can basically look at color codings. If it's red, it means there is some tissue. But when it is comparing, that is a deviation map, we are seeing the deviation from normal. So if you see something red here, which means that there is significant loss of the RNFL. And in spectralis, you would see a similar thing, but it starts with an optic, the OCT image that is more clearly shown, so that you can make a call on the centration of the scan that has been done, and then it gives you the double hump pattern. So in all these three, you can very easily look into the double hump pattern and see whether which part of the RNFL is falling below the expected green lines, that is the normative data. So double hump pattern gives you the RNFL profile, the TSNIT. The optic disc characteristics are shown as summary statistics like cup disc ratio, rim area, etc. Okay. So as I started with comparing with a clinical case, it is very important how you compare it with clinical case, because structural imaging alone will not lead you to any good glaucoma care. It has to be corresponding, it has to be correlated with a corresponding visual field effect. So you are seeing the ZEISS gives you the single scan, that is the structural functional single scan report, right? Wherein if you're using a HFA, 750i and above series, along with OCT, Cirrus OCT, then you can do it together. using separate softwares. So you will have these two imaging techniques that are seen. So you will see that, you compare what is the RNFL thicknesses, that is the TS-NIT or the quadrant-wise RNFL thickness, you correlate them. Say, for example, there is this inferior, in this retardation map, you can see that the inferior part of the retina is blue, wherein it's supposed to be somewhere oranges, which means that there is there is loss of nerve fiber layer. That is very well shown in the deviation map. So you can see that the extent of loss to that of the visual field effects. Oh, you're seeing a quadranopia, or sorry, not a quadranopia, it's a superior arc weight defect. So you can very much see a nasal step that is extending further into the superior quadrant, right? So similarly for the left eye, you can see that there is inferior RNFL defect and the corresponding visual field defect that is bearing the central visual field. So this kind of an correlation is what we do. And you can very simply see why is there no inferior defects in this patient, because the superior RNFL is within normal limits. So the double hump pattern is clearly showing that the RNFL thicknesses in the superior zone is much better. So since superior retina is healthy, inferior visual field defects are not seen. But when it comes to the inferior retina, the patient is having a significant thinning in the inferior retinal region, especially in the inferior temporal part, and that is what is showing up as defects in both the right and the left eye. So to summarize, let me get back to the black rainbow again. That time we saw about pathophysiology, but here I am going to compare it with which OCT is useful for you, which generations of OCTs are useful. So to understand apoptosis, looking for metabolic markers, which is currently in research. I saw a couple of RO papers that were looking onto OCTs with imaging techniques to look at ganglion cell health or the extracellular matrix health, glutamate toxicity, nitric oxide toxicity markers using angiography and OCT imaging techniques. And already available are ultra high resolution OCTs, which can give you the ganglion cell thicknesses. Even the RTView is expected to find out at this region, wherein a swept source OCT, all OCT angiography can give you early changes in this part of the disease spectrum. Okay, and moment you start using the conventional OCTs, be it spectral domain OCT, or today there's going to be next generation Optos is coming out with a wide field OCT, wherein it's a 45-degree image. Wherever you click, you can get the OCT image. And you also have a lot of handheld OCTs coming in, so that we as optometrists can do home care much better. So these are something OCTs that we can use in this part of the spectrum of glaucoma patients, where when they start to have early diseases, visual field changes, and they are on anti-glaucoma medication, and you can follow them up to ensure they do not go from early changes to moderate to severe and finally become blind. So thank you for your patient listening, and then I'm open for questions.
Before Ashwini opens up questions, I just have a quick poll because seeing the audience start of dropping and coming back. So Ramesh, with your permission, I'll just launch this poll. Yeah, so just to know the profile of the audience that are with us today. So please, we give you a minute to answer. Just click whatever that is appropriate for you, so that we know about the all 68 of you who are here with us today. We had about 75, but I think people are dropping in and coming back. So.
I'm sorry for starting the recording.
So we're just about, everyone can answer, okay? Because this is nothing but just, we just want to understand your profile, yeah. We have another 10 seconds more for the poll to close. Kind request for everybody to participate. There's a reason why this poll is being done now. So if you really contribute to serving us, that will be really, really helpful. Okay.
Jamil, one kind request or advice is like, probably the poll thing can be done even earlier to talk so that, we as speakers, we can slightly
know.
tune it. If it is more of students, then we could make it, it's the same image, but we could vary the pitch, when it comes to using.
Yeah. No, I actually we wanted to do it first, but just that we didn't have that many participants in the first 5 minutes. So they were just joining in, and I didn't want to stop your talk in the middle. And now we have good numbers, and this is the profile for you. Of course, students sort of top it, 53 plus 4, 57% students, and about 38% optometrist and 2% ophthalmologist, and there is other members who are here with us. Yes. Okay, Ashwini, over to you.
So thank you, sir. It was a fantastic session with loads of knowledge, starting from the basics of glaucoma till the advancements. We have the first question from our dear Dr. KK, sir. He has asked, do I need to refer all glaucoma suspect patients for OCT? If not, are we going to miss the diagnosis of glaucoma? And he also wants to know how often a glaucoma patient needs to undergo OCT.
Okay. KK says a very valid question. So the first thing that goes is the clinical risks, right? We do a good glaucoma history and we understand the basic risk profile of a patient. And then you find a glaucoma suspect. So a glaucoma suspect can be, I would see them into two aspects. One who fall under OHTS or, who have a healthy retina, but who end up having only pressures being high, like, only the IOP being high. In those cases, the preferred practice patterns for OHT patients show that every 6 months once you do an RNFL evaluation to find the pre-perimetric analysis. But if you're having a glaucoma suspect, which becomes a more clinical challenge, right? Wherein they have a large optic nerve characteristics, and we are so doubtful if it's a tilted disc or those with a larger cup to disc ratio and RNFL changes, then we would start with doing a good baseline. So a good baseline OCT to be done is 2 OCTs with a signal with a good signal strength of more than 8, and then following up them every 3 months if it's a glaucoma suspect with other risks. So the whole thing is a complex thing wherein we need to also bring in other characteristics of what is he a pre-perimetric patient, or is he having any other risk factors like family history or angle being narrow and angle closure is there. In those cases, when the risk is slightly higher, then the first 1 year, you do it at least 3 times is what the World Glaucoma Association recommends. And then if it is stable enough, it's in the pre-perimetric stage. All I'm talking about is not those who are having established glaucoma, that is visual field damage correlating with the optic nerve changes. This is not I'm talking about. If sir asks glaucoma suspect, then first 1 year, if it is a disc-related glaucoma suspect, 3 times is what I would recommend. And then after, if it is stable, if I'm getting a same redundant values every time, then once in every 6 months. And OHT is also, you could follow the similar trial, but at least 2 times in the first 1 to 2 years is very important. And then every year, you need to repeat the glaucoma OCT. And the practice pattern changes moment you go on to somebody with established visual field defects, that is early glaucoma and mild, moderate, or severe glaucoma. Sorry that I didn't bring in that aspect of preferred practice pattern as part of this talk, because I thought I will limit only to the OCT.
Yes, sir.
This itself, I had brought in too many things at one go, so.
So next is from Optom Lata Balaji. She wants to know what instruction do we give as a primary eye care professional if the result of OCT falls in borderline, and how often do we repeat the OCT? She is like asking, assuming that the signal strength is good, will the ophthalmologist take forward the line of treatment or would they repeat it? She doesn't want to cause a double expense for the patient, so she wants a guidance on this.
Agreed. So that's a very good question. Like, getting the confidence of our fellow ophthalmology colleague is going to be, it's a relative aspect. So how good you have, and it also depends on what technique you are using, right? If your imaging technique is If it's a recent imaging techniques, if it is spectral domain OCT, one of these imaging techniques, then they would go with a good one. So answering the first part of the question is, moment you see a borderline or these changes for the first time, you just say that you need to repeat the test after 1 or 2 months. Okay, after a month's time, you do a repeat. So the baseline has to be well established. Moment your baseline is established, do not frighten the patient, because many times in the time wherein till they start getting a visual field defect, much of treatment options are not there. Okay, but there are some practices. There is a difference in theory of approaches. Early, let us start with reducing pressures right away moment you see an RNFL defect. But other school of thought is they still wait for the first visual field damage to appear. So it depends on your clinical routine that you would believe in and the evidence that you believe in. So you basically say to the patient that the structural changes, which is the important thing in glaucoma, is showing significant changes. Okay, but having said that, what is very important is sometimes these some patients might have such a physiological appearance also. So we will follow you up. So wait for a 6 months period. When you are seeing a deterioration in the thickness, then you end up saying to the patient that you are showing a change in the thickness from last time. And this has to be also well correlated with the perimetry, right? So if there is a corresponding perimetric visual field changes, then I think you have nailed the challenge that you're saying, that you are seeing a structural change and a related corresponding functional damage. So I don't see a challenge there. So that is where you explain to the patient that now we have established there is a glaucoma optic nerve changes or glaucomatous disease that is setting into your eye, and let us start looking at co-managing you with our ophthalmology colleague. Second thing, back at your question, wherein if I send to an ophthalmologist, will they do it again? It again depends on, because the biggest challenge with glaucoma is I not only use for a single scan, because I use it for progression assessment. For example, if I have an HRT spectralis and my ophthalmology colleague has a serous OCT, they have to do a good progression analysis. We have to do in both. So yes, this adds up to the cost of the patient, okay? But we have to, it is not possible for all of us to have a single stream aligned instrument, right? So in your care, I would see it this way. So we are now in Mahe, we have the OCT angiography. We also had the serous OCT, right? So the ophthalmology colleague has that. And but what we have, we are trying to get in our optometry practice in clinic is an handheld SDOCT, right? That's what we'll use for community screening. So what we'll do is, I would use it for primary referrals and send it to it, and also inform the patient that there'll be a scan done if your colleague has a different OCT, right? If you're practicing referring ophthalmologist has the same imaging systems, then they wouldn't be required to repeat if the quality of the imaging is good. Okay, hope I answer, or if not, you can trigger on. Yeah.
Optom Tennarasu sir, he has asked whether we need to refer for OCT when there is a positive family history for glaucoma.
Very good question. Very good question. But you know, the preferred practice patterns do give a good weightage to positive family history. Okay. The main challenge is how reliable is the positive family history, because many of us will ask about parents, but more important is the sibling. So if there is a sibling of theirs, if you have their brothers also your patient, you know that he is suffering from glaucoma, and it is better that you have seen his sibling today, and it is very useful to do an OCT. So I would recommend to the practice patterns to do also recommend that if you have a positive family history, it is good to have a baseline at the earliest. So the whole idea is this: if I have a good baseline OCT imaging early in the lifespan of that black rainbow curve the patient is going to suffer from, I would make better informed evidence-based judgments when the progression is happening. So yes, you can ask for, and if it is affordable and feasible for the patient though.
Optum Gopinath has a question about machine learning. So he asks, how is the AI or machine learning, how will it impact the OCT interpretation for better glaucoma clinical care and prognosis?
Beautiful. So in the recent decade, people have been, the first focus for AI has been onto the fundus imaging, because that is what is most affordable. So can we quantify the cup to disc ratios and adjust and give you basic image analysis and bring in AI into normal fundus images, right? But over the last half a decade, or 5 years, 6 years, has been a lot of concentration on OCT image analysis. Because if you see, these OCT images are quite tricky when we have to look in, and we might miss out those early losses, right? So when I say corresponding visual field defects, an AI algorithm that looks at OCT and also the visual function losses can easily help me find out where that changes are and give me more visual interpretation and risk assessments. So it is only going to complement Gopi, wherein you're going to make better judgments using AI solutions, okay? And most of the imaging softwares or the parent softwares, they are already bringing in these aspects. And how AI is going to help is the recent paper which I was going through is into looking in the other risk factors, making a clinical decision support software or inputs based on other risk factors. Say, for example, how would I bring in, say, I can bring in the known risk factors like high IOP, family history, and then make a risk assessment. But how about and retinal image analysis or OCT analysis of the veins and the artery thicknesses? This was the way the guys are going, because they know that the arterial thinning, okay, that is the glaucoma and systemic hypertension. If it is there, then it adds the risk. But now with AI, it is adding to the complement to understanding the characteristics of blood flow that is happening there, or the characteristics of the arterioles and the blood supply, and bringing in that aspect into the glaucoma analysis also. So AI and things are there to stay, and it is very interesting to learn more how they're going to help us.
Next, we have few questions from Optum Meghna. I think I'll just club them together and put it forth. So she has asked, what is the notching in glaucoma disc due to? And she has asked about, is it good to do a strabismus surgery in an operated glaucoma patient? And she has asked how to differentiate between exudate and drusen in an OCT image. Maybe you can first address the notching in glaucoma disc, sir.
Okay, yeah. Let me bring in that case itself. I think that case will be a better way to, sorry for swapping. Yep. So another very, for example, just to, oh, I'm sorry, it goes on to the recorded view. Okay, fine. So I hope this slide is seen by you. So why does notching happen? Okay, so you should look in that, remember that, the optic nerve head, the neuroretinal rim, is not a physical structure, right? It is basically the scleral foramen, or the opening through which the nerve fibers are leaving the eye, right? So what is comprising of these nerve fiber layers? These are the peripheral nerves that are the arcuate nerves, which are coming from the peripheral part of the retina, which arc around and occupy the inferior superior zone. So when I have a ganglion cell loss in somewhere in the peripheral retina, okay, then there is the inferior loss. This bundle of nerves, say for example, the one that you are seeing here on this yellow is dead, then this whole bunch of nerves are going to be lost. Moment they are lost, okay, they were so far occupying this part of the opening of the sclera, right? So suddenly there's a loss in the nerve fiber layer. So therefore, the retinal rim, the tissue here is thin down, and that is what is shown as a notching sign here. Okay, so the loss of new retinal rim is represented by a notch. A notch is basically a kind of an excavated region in the optic nerve head, where the rim is showing significant thinning in a specific part of the optic nerve head, is due to the fact that the nerve fibers which are coming from the periphery, okay, are lost. Therefore, they are not occupying that zone. Okay, so in OCT, you basically look in to the double hump pattern. Okay, you mainly look into the double hump pattern and correlate. Again, you have to always remember your OCT image, your fundus image. That's why in this picture also I put a fundus image. Okay, an OCT without a fundus image or a fundus drawing that you have done is very misleading, right? So you basically look in, okay, you are seeing an RNFL loss here in this inferotemporal region. So there is inferior temporal. How is the RNFL thicknesses? So this is a better way. Or you can also look into this quadrant-wise thing wherein you are seeing those notches. Hope I answered her question, why
Yes.
it occurs. And
Yes,
there is
sir.
also other theory which talks about the lamina cribrosa, which is the age-old belief that in the superior inferior zones of the lamina cribrosa, the sizes are oval, and that leads to the axonal damage risks, and also the blood vessel supply. So it's a complex mechanism that affects, but what we have to remember is the inferior and the superior poles are the first to get affected, and that is what we should look at.
Yeah. So, sir, do you want to answer the other two questions? It's kind of out of scope of this topic. One is about strabismus surgery and glaucoma surgery.
Right. So strabismus surgery for glaucoma, though it is not my core domain of expertise, but recent evidences have been showing that even eye movements are creating stretch or causing a lot of damage to the ganglion cell complex. Okay, GCA is changed, or the choroidal thicknesses are modified with every eye movement. So a glaucomatous patient has a problem with every eye movement, and these pull those tendons bring in when they do surgeries can lead to a lot of changes. But the whole aspect is it is again the risk to benefit ratio that we take care of in any clinical decision, right? Okay, if I don't do a squint surgery for that patient, is we have the binocular vision queen here. The patient is not going to enjoy the binocular status that is there. Say if he has, mostly in that age group, it could be a 6-nerve palsy that could have caused that exotropic condition or something like that. So what is that underlying cause that is leading to? Why was that glaucoma squint surgery adopted? Should be looked in. But mostly, they wouldn't do both the surgeries together. That is, even though we have the best clinical hands. But yes, eye movements and glaucoma are also being studied as one of the risk factors these days. Okay. So the retina one, I would recommend you to go through the videos from the previous speakers, because that is better.
It was done by Optom Ramya, a wonderful session on
she rocked them.
retina.
A lot of learning
Yes,
people from that.
Yeah. So next is from Optom Lata Balaji. The dark rainbow that was shown in towards the end, which OCT do we suggest for the patient if we are in a private practice?
Very good. So if you look at things like, the ones over here, the ultra high resolution OCTs or even OCT angiographies are very expensive. So the OCT angiography one started 80 lakhs to 1 crore. So these are mostly in higher tertiary healthcare centers or research setups. But as a clinician, I would recommend you, like how many of you would have invested in a handheld imaging system like a fundus imaging systems. You should put into either spectral domain OCT or a handheld spectral domain OCTs in your practice. So mostly a spectral domain OCT or a spectralis or an RT view, these are most commonly seen now, are the ones that I would recommend in your practice. You can refer this. And very importantly, remember to use the same imaging techniques for the same patient, because glaucoma is not a single time incident, it is a life. The patient has to cope up and live with this glaucomatous changes. If you're using RTView OCT, please use the same OCT for that respective patient, because many of us in our practice might not own each of these imaging systems, right? We will end up asking for refer them to a diagnostic setup or an ophthalmology clinic who has this OCTs. That is more a better way to go. But you should make a note that you had asked this patient for RTView. Say, for example, if I am using a pre-perimetric glaucoma and ocular hypertensive, I would go about, say, if I'm using an ocular hypertensive and things, I will see whether if I have a swept source OCT or OCT angiography facility, I would do that even, right? Or if I'm using a patient with pre-perimetric glaucoma, then RTView GCA is better. But mild, moderate, and severe glaucoma, either Cirrus or Spectralis is what I would more prefer.
So the next question is from Optum Ayman Zahra. How frequent we should advise for OCT post AGV implant?
Okay, so post valve implants, it mainly depends on how much of target IOP control has it achieved. Okay, so the practices have been just after 3 months they do they reevaluate the baseline. Okay, because there is a change in the overall risk profile, and then after that 6 months to 1 year, and every 6 months is what I have seen during my time at Shankar Nethralaya has been the practice, but it depends on the patient's other risk factors too.
There's a question from Optom Deepa. She wants to know whether we should be doing visual fields each time along with OCT when the guideline says OCT has to be done thrice a year.
Fantastic question. It will be really good to do it, okay? But again, it is the feasibility and with this post-COVID times, it's going to be challenging. So, but it is at least important to align 2 of your OCT evaluations. Why we do 3 times OCT in a year is to establish within the month's time a baseline that is better, so that you'll know whether are we getting reliable OCT reports from the patient, right? The other factors which could affect the quality of imaging and everything are taken care of. And then within a year, we are going to see 6 months time, 3 times is good. But at least 2 times if you match. Perimetries are usually done twice a year, right? For most of the pre-perimetric and early glaucomas. So I would align it together when you do call the patient for things. So mostly in many comprehensive ophthalmology practice, they have a package, right? You know, they go for OCT, anterior segment, posterior segment, and then perimetry as a package together, right? So not in all the 3, if it's possible in all the 3, but at least 2.
A question from Optom Preeta Ramprasad. She asks, how soon after starting glaucoma medication in a newly diagnosed glaucoma case or after performing a glaucoma surgery can OCT be done to monitor the RNFL or ONH changes?
Yeah, beautiful. Preeta, so the basic thing is, if I'm starting a patient with they are starting, if our colleague ophthalmology is starting with an anti-glaucoma medication, we would do a 2-week trial usually. Both that is getting redundant these days. But after a month's time is where I would re-establish the baseline if the target IOP is well achieved. Say, for example, this is a patient who had come to us with a 30 millimeter of mercury, and you have brought it down right away to mid 15s or mid 20s, right? Or 15 millimeter mercury, have reduced by 50%. Then after a month's time, when the cornea is healed out and then things, we repeat and do the baseline, and then use that as a baseline for further follow-up. And the same thing can be adopted for things. So it depends on how good the quality of OCT image you get. So you do a rough scan, and if still, for example, if there's a patient who has had an angle closure attack and there is a cornea that has also been edematous during that time and that is not resolved yet, then you do it even after 1.5 months, 2 months. So, but the pre-baseline after a month will be better.
Thank you, sir. She also has another question. She wants to know whether tablet Ocuvite or tablet Neurobion, whether they have any effect on the RNFL or ONH or the neuroretinal rim observable by the OCT.
I'm sorry that I do not know the answer for this question, but I would be happy to look into the best evidences that are there and kind of reflect upon to her question separately, probably after this session.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And Optum Devi, she wants to know how to interpret in case of comorbidities like glaucoma associated with DR, hypertensive retinopathy, where the RNFL changes of the retina will not be visible in a red-free photo. Is OCT a sole factor?
Yes, Devi. That's where the bigger advantage of OCT comes in, wherein we can, especially when you are going to evaluate OCT of diabetic retinopathy versus this, you can really look into not just the OCT but also bring in the GCA. So you also calculate the ganglion cell thickness and the inner plexiform layer thicknesses. So that brings you a good entity of the thickness characteristics of the glaucoma cell complex, right? So that is more useful in patients with comorbid diseases. That is what the recent evidences are highlighting.
We have one last question from Optum Nilesh in the chat box. He asks, currently being the pandemic period, we wouldn't want to move a patient from one place to another. So is it better to use a Heidelberg OCT because it provides an anterior segment OCT2, which helps us determining a PACI2? And if it is, how effective would it be in the early diagnosis compared to the other OCTs?
So HRT spectralis is a very good advantage. Yeah, that's becoming more and more common in practitioners. As rightly said, it gives you the anterior imaging, it gives you a single shot of many characteristics. It gives you OCT of the whole eye altogether, right? So along with angiographic modules that are there. So spectralis is getting more and more popular as compared to Cirrus and thing. Similarly, RTView is also heading up. These are all competitors that are coming in with value-added things, because we're not only going to do glaucoma, but when you're looking at overall quality, comprehensive, evidence-based care, as HRT spectralis gives you a good data, right? So I would go with spectralis values. There are publications that have really compared between all the three, and they have shown very good correlations between the three imaging techniques. So the only thing that we have to remember is we need to just use the same imaging techniques for the same patient and not mix them with each one of these, because the values and the aspects that we get from each of these imaging techniques are different. But as for the superiority of spectralis, it has its advantages, and that is more popularly used. There is nothing called gold standard here. Even perimetry, Humphrey is not the gold standard. If you look at it, Goldman's perimetry, what became gold standard should have been the Octopus, but Octopus did not get as popularly used as that of the Zeiss Humphrey perimeter. So it is more on the marketing and the kind of penetration into the market that has gone into making it gold standard. So there is no such thing in OCT also. All these are very highly certified and very good data. So whatever you use, you end up using the same instrument for the same patient, so that you can ensure you can enable progression assessment in these OCT images.
Yeah. Is there anyone who wants to unmute themselves and ask question directly to the speaker? I saw a few hands were raised during the session, so. Okay, so I think that's it, sir. So I would like to thank OATN and iTeach committee for giving me this opportunity to moderate such a wonderful session. Just before some time, I realized that it's our speaker Ramesh sir's birthday tomorrow. So on behalf of everyone, I would like to wish him an advanced happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone, and over to you, Rizwana ma'am.
Thank you, Ashwini, for that wonderful coordination, and also advance birthday to Dr. Ramesh. I should say that it was such a, what I should say, I'm a BV person, but still, you know, something I guess entered in here. And was very happy to see the interaction also, like everybody was really interacting well in the chat box, and Ashwini, you moderated it so beautifully well. And so this is a glaucoma specialty session. So without further ado, we just have two quick announcements. So please stay tuned, all the 50 of you right here. As you know that OATN iTeach committee, has started releasing evidence-based documents. And so we've released two so far, one on blue light blocking lenses, evidence for blue cut filters, and another one on convergence insufficiency. And now we have the next one on primary open angle glaucoma. So I request Dr. KK to first say a few words about this evidence-based document release, so that we can then go ahead and release this document.
Thank you, Rashima. So thank you, Rizwana, and thank you, Ramesh, for the wonderful talk. I think you required at least a few months to make all of us to understand each and every aspect of glaucoma. I understand that limitation, but it's a wonderful talk, a lot of take home for many of the practitioners and students. And this is a wonderful thing. I think OATN has initiated this for last few months, and it is the idea behind this is to ensure that we should go more towards evidence-based. Students should learn the importance of evidence-based practice. At the same time, the practitioners also slowly ensure that everything we are doing for the benefit of the patient should be based on the evidences. And in a small way, we thought it will be more appropriate. OATN can initiate this by giving this document. This document is done by people who are in this field for quite a long time, who is working in these areas, and ensuring that whatever is latest have been incorporated into it. And the last two document also, thank to people who are involved in it. This third document is on glaucoma, especially on open angle glaucoma. We know as much we see angle closure glaucomas, open angle glaucoma is also very common. And of course, with whatever available, like Ramesh told, even if you don't have OCT, whatever you're having at your private setup, you can ensure that you can create evidence-based practice there. This is an initiative by Mr. Jyoti Balaji, senior optometrist from Shankar Nethralaya, who compiled it, along with input from Dr. Rashima, and I could chip in some more on outline part of it. And this, I think I would like to request Mr. Jyoti Balaji and Rashima to tell about how it is going to be beneficial to all the practitioners and the student. So Jyoti Balaji.
Rashima, are you there?
Jyoti, you can talk first and then Rashima can add.
Okay. So basically the idea was to reach out our members with the latest information on referral pattern. So basically what kind of sign, this is the commonest question we get in the social media when I have this kind of a patient, what do I do? And this is the right time, I think, when we talk about glaucoma related diagnostic, and this referral guideline is going to be used. I like to thank Dr. KK, who is the initiator of this particular aspect, and I'm happy that I'm part of this. I will be happy if the document going to be used length and breadth, and people can give feedback in case we missed out anything or any other improvement area. We would be happy to bring out the updated on a regular basis. And That's all from my side. Is Rashima is around?
Yeah, sir, I'm here.
Yeah. Yes, Rashima.
Actually, I should thank OATN for giving the opportunity to compile, actually to review about the referral pattern for open angle glaucoma. I think this was initiated when we had the OATN talk on diagnostics. So following that, we thought we will just release some guidelines about each conditions through OATN, which could be kept in clinic for the practitioners. So this document will have information about open angle glaucoma. We have added evidences which are more supportive towards open angle glaucoma, and also given some clinical inputs on how to evaluate the angle, how to evaluate the disc, and when we should refer to the ophthalmologist, and what are the frequency of follow-up of these patients. I hope every optometry practitioners would use this document in the clinic and make it to a better use. Please send us a feedback about the document so that we could improvise it in the future. Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so with that, we're just releasing this document, which I've already shared in the chat box for people to access, so you can access it. So this is this beautiful document compiled by JJB sir, contributed by Dr. Rashima and Dr. KK, with everything that you need to know about open angle glaucoma. Okay, beautiful images right there. So congratulations to this team. And then the next announcement. Oh, good to see Rashima. Thanks, Rashima.
I didn't see that it was on.
Oh, okay. Okay. And the next announcement that we have to make here is about the upcoming World Sight Day, not upcoming, rather the World Sight Day as such is over, but then we know that we can celebrate World Sight Day throughout this month, and the theme that was suggested by WHO was Hope in Sight. So the Optometric Association of Tamil Nanvargal this year is inviting ideas from the eye care community, addressing some of the major issues that are ahead of us. Okay, so basically this is such a great opportunity for all of us, being both optometry practitioners as well as students, to brainstorm about innovative solutions to address some of the common problem statements that are in front of us. So we have given certain problem statements that includes, refractive error management, tackling the burden of presbyopia, innovations for tele-eye health and primary eye care. So it's all listed here, and you could look at this, address this problem statement from the perspective of developing, say, an equipment, or coming up with a software or an application or an eye care delivery model. Just it's open to your creativity, to the level of creativity, how much ever you can explore this. Write a very, very short essay within the word limit of 250 to 300 words, and send your entries to this email ID. And this is eligible for only our OATN members, basically both practitioner members and student members. But those of you who are not members, don't give up your heart. You can partner with one of our members. Actually, the right thing to do is you can become a member, you can become a part of our community. In any other scenario, you could partner with one of our member and then join hands and come up with these ideas. The fantastic news is this: after you submit these entries, the top 5 submissions will be chosen for oral presentation in one of the iTeach platform. We will bring in appropriate experts for these ideas, who will serve as the sort of expert support, or even the launch pad to take your idea forward to the execution stage. So if you bring a prototype model, we will find you an expert that will help you take your idea to the stage of execution. Okay, so anybody who's having this idea inside your mind, don't let that idea sink in. Use this opportunity and launch the idea. And Dr. KK, do you want to say a few words about this? Because I would see this as your brainchild, and so could you please tell something about this idea?
I know actually, in fact, OAT and iTeach platform is the one which triggered it. Thanks to Dr. Ramesh, Dr. Prem Nandini, and Maheshwari, are the brains which has established themselves into their own ideas, been into the market already. And I feel there must be many Ramesh and Prem Nandinis and Maheshwaris in our as a member, but they're only looking at opportunities how to take it forward. And I see that OATN can be a good platform trying to help them connect and do it. And we also learn out of this. And after all, India is looking for all these innovative brain to come and ensure that more and more products become made in India rather than importing from other countries. It will be a great opportunity for thing. And thanks to the president and the office bearers for taking it forward. And definitely I'm expecting some good ideas which help in our own implementation and delivering our product to the really deserving population. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. KK. We have our senior optometrist, Sir Singaravelu sir. Just we want you to say a couple of words about this World Sight Day and OATN's participation, sir.
Actually, first of all, I would like to thank you all for taking such initiative steps and doing all these things. World Sight Day, first of all, we must bring out about the optometry and optometrist to the public. That is the first thing. Since 10 years I was going on telling to all the peoples, at least keep a banner there in front of your outlet or your clinic. We are celebrating World Sight Day. We are celebrating World Optometry Day. Then uniformly, if we keep it throughout Tamil Nadu, public will definitely ask what is it, what is World Optometry Day, what is World Sight Day, all these things. That will promote our category or profession very well. That was my idea since in 2012 I was going on telling. Very few people are doing all these things. But this year we have to do something in other way also to reach the public. I think our president will take the fantastic step to promote this. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Dr. Ramesh ji, irkara?
Irukkaru sir. Ramesh?
சொல்லுங்க சார் சொல்லுங்க.
நமஸ்காரம். இனிய நாள் பிறந்த நாள் வாழ்த்துக்கள். முன்னதாகவே வாழ்க வளமுடன். பல்லாண்டு பல்லாண்டு பல்லாயிரத்தாண்டு பல கோடி நூறாயிரம் சொல்லாண்ட மணிவண்ணன் திருவருளால் நீங்கள் வாழ வேண்டும். வாழ்க வளமுடன். நன்றி.
Thank you, sir. And I think we've come to the end of the beautiful session today. And Singaravelu sir, I request you to give vote of thanks also for the session so that we can wrap up today's session.
அந்த மேடம் பேர் என்ன, அஸ்வினியா?
ஆமா, அஸ்வினி சார் மாடரேட் பண்ணாங்க.
Yes sir.
என்னன்றி கொண்டார்க்கும் உய்வுண்டாம் உய்வில்லை செய்நன்றி கொன்ற மகற்கு. நீங்கள் செய்திருக்கின்ற நன்றிக்கு உரிய செயல்கள் அனைத்தும் பாராட்டுக்குரியது. தமிழ் வருமா மேடம்?
வரும் சார், கண்டிப்பா.
Thank you very much, Madam Ashwini. You are bridging definitely the Dr. Ramesh and us. What we want to ask all these things, the question was asked by my colleagues. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramesh ji. I know you are a fantastic professor. I had your classes nearly from 2013, 14, 15. Without keeping anything, just drawing on this board, and you were started talking about the glaucoma. I was wondering, as we people used to keep all these things in the ready, just like a ready reckoner. We used to read this thing, this thing like this. But you are mastering this subject. Thank you very much for giving a fantastic class to us. You are always our master. Thank you very much for the audience. And also, the work was done by Purnima, Jyoti Balaji, Rizwana Madam, and apart from all these things, our Rajarishi, Dr. KK. Thank you very much to all of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for a good opportunity to meet you all.
Thank you, sir.
It's very important to connect through these platforms too.
Yeah.
So all our good friends again.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, and the entire team of
Thank you.
OATN. Yeah, the office bearers of OATN and everybody, all the participants, especially everyone who is still with us for the last 1.5 hours. Thank you, everybody, and happy Sunday.